Hello, and welcome to the first of 6 videos from the Roman Army lecture on campaigns and logistics. I think Don's trying to bust in. Okay, so in this first video, I'm just going to give you a little overview and what's to come, and then tell you about some general matters concerning logistics. Okay, so right on my face, and I'm going to start at the top. Okay, so right. Campaigns and supply logistics. So I'm going to tell you about the big picture of logistics, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about food, sort of Vindolanda and food should be reversed. Some general points about what Roman soldiers might eat, and then look at an example of Elysian, and then we'll move on to some case studies like Vindolanda, and then we'll talk about planning for war, how provincial administration information fits into all this, and then I've been on Hunt's Perdianum and Vegetius, another case study. As far as our three guys, okay, I have 3 little models who to be Pulo, Polion, and Aemilianus. Don't take their appearance as any way representative of what they would look like. But here's Pulo. Okay, this is my friend Pulo. There he is. You can't see his face because he's like he's camera shy. Move your shield down. Okay, he's blonde. So in his day, there was a less what's the word I'm looking for? A less developed supply network. More ad hoc because there weren't permanent bases, and the Romans could get things as they needed where they went, but it was more of a process. Okay, by the time we get to Polion's day, okay, and it's this guy with the red. Again, don't take their peachiness, skin and blonde or whatever. It's indicative of just 3 different looking soldiers. It was a much more fully developed supply network. Okay, with roads, stations and forts, etc. Some of the supplies came from the immediate vicinity, some from slightly further away, and then some from more central locations. By the time we get to Aemilianus, again, not representative, just a different looking guy with a beard. It was a fully developed supply network. Much of it was centralized in ways that hadn't been before, although there's still some local and some regional things. So it changed over time. And some of what I'm going to show you is, a lot of what I'm going to discuss is not necessarily how supplies worked under Pulo, but more likely how it worked under Apollyon and Aemilianus. Okay, so, right. Now, one of the things, of course, the supply, especially in the case of war, and there's sort of at least a couple of sides to this. There's supplying soldiers in wartime, and then just in the day-to-day, everyday life. Few places, one of the big challenges, of course, is if you have, lots of people in one place, is getting enough stuff for them. And one of the reasons why the Romans shifted from the early incarnations of their fortifications, you see some of the earliest ones on the, I guess that's the Lower Rhine, heading in towards the North Sea. A lot of the early fortifications around there from the reign of Augustus are quite massive. And then they sort of got smaller pretty quickly after that because it's very difficult to house multiple legions in one location. Just the logistical challenge is significant. So, a lot of smaller forts and smaller ones spread out helps for defensive matters, but it also helps for supply matters. Now, when soldiers were off to war, how much a campaigning army might take depends on all sorts of factors. How many men are involved, what season are they traveling, what kind of campaign are they going on. Is this a long campaign? Are they invading somewhere with a view to take it over, or is it a raid? Basically, how close is it to Roman locations further back where they might have access to supplies. Now, obviously, within the Roman Empire, especially, again, this is where we go from Pulo to Polion. By the time of Polion's day, we have this intricate road network, which you'll see in, I think, the next slide. There were roads going everywhere. The famous maxim, all roads lead to Rome. So they had a very developed supply network. Roads, fairly, well supplied, well cared for roads, central roads, less well cared for, minor roads. But there are also ports, so you could supply things by sea. And then there were locations where, vast quantities of supplies might be stored. One of the greatest strengths of the Romans in war and just in general was their supply network, at least in the imperial era. and that played a big part in helping them to be successful when they were invaded or they were doing the invading. So here's the supply network. It's not as, it's a bit small, but you can see the outline of Roman frontiers, okay, and then running in the east, and then in the south, and then sort of up in the north. So a lot of the fortifications are not just on the frontiers, but the frontiers themselves are along major transportation routes. So like the Danube River, over here is a major transportation network, and a lot of forts along the Danube River. A lot of them along the Rhine River, which is also a major transportation network. And then there were roads over sort of in the east and the southeast, the Traianic Road, and to some degree in the south as well. And there are also, of course, major roads heading to Italy, and you can sort of, I know it's a bit faint, sort of make out a bit of the little red outlines. If you have the slides, you can zoom in and see if the roads played an important part in all this. So this supply network meant that they could move to where they needed to go, bring supplies, men, material, food, etc., up to the front. Obviously, in civil wars, there are supplies readily available. Foreign wars, the further away you go from imperial territory, the more challenging it is. Just to use an early example of a non-Roman, foe. When Carthage famously invaded Italy in the Second Punic War, and Hannibal had all its success, one of the challenges was trying to get enough supplies to keep his men going for a few years in Italy, which is mostly foreign territory. So it's no mean feat to stay in the field outside of your own environment and to keep yourself supplied. It's a big undertaking. Major expeditions abroad would require lots of supplies, lots of planning, and there are so many things that could go wrong. Okay. Finally, I'll just say conditions are important. If conditions were harsh and there weren't sufficient preparations, things could go terribly wrong. Again, one of the great things about the Romans is that they had a fairly well-developed supply system, tribal armies, so those without the same political structures maybe weren't able to keep themselves in the field for quite as long, unless, of course, they took stuff from the Romans. Now, one of the things the Romans were good at, they got better at over time, was they could also operate outside of campaign season. It might not seem like much to us when we have frozen stuff and whatever is possible, but you have to bear in mind that food only grows certain times of year, and although the conditions are more conducive to growing things for longer, for a point, a lot of campaigning early Roman history would have been spring, summer, into the early fall, and a bit later, as they had these developed networks, they could push things a little bit later. Anyway, so that's my little overview of some of the general factors to do with supply. And now I'm going to try to stop this video again.